Hey everybody, before we get going, a little word from today's sponsor, Orbit MI. Staying compliant in today's maritime industry is harder than ever. CII, EU ETS, Fuel EU, you know the drill. The list keeps growing. That's where Orbit MI comes in. Their Orbit Reporter solution automates regulatory reporting, ensures data accuracy, and keeps you ahead of the curve. No more errors, no more stress, just connected compliance. Recognized as one of the 150 most innovative companies in maritime 4 years running, Orbit MI is trusted by ship owners worldwide. Ready to turn compliance into a competitive advantage? Visit orbitmi.com/connected-maritime-era and get started today. And if you want to learn more about advertising on the podcast, contact my good friends at Digital Ship. Now, on to the show. Welcome, everyone. You are listening to The Last Dinosaur, and I'm your host, Chris Aversano. This is the podcast where we explore the evolving maritime landscape and hear from the innovators leading the charge. Today's guest is Stuart Ostrow, founder and president of ShipMoney. ShipMoney is a global leader in maritime digital payment solutions and helps ship owners, managers, cruise lines replace outdated cash to master and wire transfer systems with a modern, secure, and cost-effective payment program. Stuart, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Chris, for having me here on this beautiful Friday. When the invitation came and I saw the name of the podcast being The Last Dinosaur, it raised a whole bunch of questions, of which we won't necessarily explore on this podcast relative to maritime payments. Maybe there is some nexus, but again, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, you're quite welcome. And I'm excited to have you on because we've been hearing a lot lately, at least I've been seeing a lot lately in LinkedIn and other places about the great work that you're doing. So step back a little bit, and I'd love to hear, and I think the audience loves to hear about kind of a little bit about your professional journey and what led you to found and to lead ShipMoney, because as an ex-seafarer, getting paid, frankly, wasn't that big of an issue for me because I was American flag and I work for a large oil company. So it was never an issue. But I'm saying that from a very privileged position because I know for a lot of seafarers, that wasn't always the case. So I'd love to hear that background.
Once upon a time, I am a CPA professional training, Big Six original out of college, and became disillusioned with how that actually worked in the Big Six corporate environment. And went to work for a small accounting firm where you actually learn how it works and understand clients at a much more granular level. But I was a frustrated accountant, as many are. And years ago, I read a business plan, and that business plan talked about prepaid. And it piqued my interest, and I began to do research and got a hold of an internal document for MasterCard, which announced their prepaid solutions globally. And in this 20-some page document, I realized that there was a potential industry. You had credit, which has been in existence for 50, 60 years. You had debit, which had been in existence for 20 or 30 years. And you had this evolving third leg of the payment scheme called prepaid. And prepaids could come in many different flavors. It could be gift cards, incentive cards, payroll cards, etc. So once I got a hold of that document, I put together a business plan. I raised some friends and family money. Found a bank sponsor early in the United States that understood and started a prepaid business. And voila, I was in business. The original approach had nothing to do with maritime. It actually had to do with specialized insurance payments being sold through an agency that was an early investor in the company as a way to collect a low premium insurance payments for seniors. And we had some moderate success. A college friend of mine came to me and said, hey, the president works in the maritime industry. They're having a problem paying crew members wanting to talk to them. And it was a local company here in Miami called MTN many years ago, Maritime Telecommunications Network, that provides SATCOM services. And when I went to speak with them, they had about 90 staff on 90 cruise vessels that were all foreign nationals. They used to bring in the United States here in Miami to train them, walk them over to a bank to open up an account, and voila, that's how they pay them. The banks became more and more difficult to open up accounts for foreign nationals. And I said to them, well, I've got this payroll card program. Here's how it works. The members get paid onto an account. They have a debit card, spend the money. And they said, that's great. So we introduced it. And the CEO of the company said to me, hey, we have a footprint in the power cruise industry. why don't we go out and sell this to the cruise industry? And that was essentially the light bulb moment. And I tripped into a market that had foreign nationals globally that were paid in cash. And the key to making this work was what the crew members do when they got paid in cash on those cruise ships. Well, if they were lucky enough, they step off of the ship, they go into port somewhere, they take their cash, they take it to Western Union, they take it to RIA, they would take it to MoneyGram, they would take it to some local facilities, send it home. So during that time, I was introduced to a colleague who was involved in the pay scheme in the cruise industry. And he introduced me to a company called TravelX. And I said, well, if I can take your wire service and connect it to a payroll card and offer it to the cruise line industry, we have something. And at the time, we were the first company in the world to ever do a single sign-on where a prepaid card, a prepaid payroll card, had access to a wire service online. So TravelX saw it as an opportunity. We spent a number of months developing this and essentially had a solution to enable crew members to get paid electronically while they're on board, send money home. And I remember distinctly where I was standing the first transaction that happened. And I looked at this and said, okay, well, this is good. The next day there were 2 wires and I knew I was in business. And from MTN, because they had a presence on all the cruise ships, that led us to our first client, which was a spa operator in the industry, a company called Steiner. And Steiner had a couple thousand crew on 100-some vessels, and they adopted this. And that led us to introductions to the cruise lines. And over time, globally, the cruise lines worldwide have adopted these forms of payments as an alternative to paying in cash. As that was evolving, I realized that if the cruise industry represented crew members, the commercial industry represented, 7 times X, or a much larger population. And at the time, during that time, I was introduced to Maritime that used to manage all the crew payments out of the Isle of Man. And we went there and I realized that there was very complicated and difficult to pay crew members, which are in the commercial space. 25 crew members on a ship, and the way in which they're paid is a portion is paid in cash and a wire is sent home. And we saw an opportunity basically to pursue commercial in parallel to cruise. My old company, I had sold my old company and basically was fortunate enough not to sign a non-compete and started new. And about 10 years ago, we started ShipMoney with the specific intent to not only pursue cruise, but expand into the commercial market as well. That's a short version of a very, very long story.
It's a fascinating story because I think, like I said before, is that getting paid is one of the most critical parts of it. And again, I've been very fortunate in my short seagoing career not necessarily to ever have to worry about that. What was the reaction or the feedback? Let's putting aside the office staff, but let's talk about the sailors, the seafarers. When you're presenting this idea, I'm wondering if it was a double-edged sword. Like on the one hand, having cash or having kind of something on hand felt satisfying and kind of the norm. And here you are proposing a different way to them with their livelihood. Talk a little bit about some of the feedback that you got from these guys.
In the initial conversations with Steiner, which was the first large client that had looked at and adopted this, as we were working on developing the program for them, I sat down with our executives and we said, okay, how are we going to introduce this? And I said, we're going to make this on a voluntary basis. I said, it'll never work. People don't like change. Why don't we do this as an opt-out? This is how you're going to get paid. And if you don't want to get paid, you have to specifically opt out. And at the time, that company paid their crew members per cruise. So if a crew member was on a 3-day cruise, they would get paid in cash every 3 days. If they were on a 7-day cruise, they get paid every 7 days. And what was crazy is they're headquartered here in Miami, and the commission slips and the pay stubs used to be printed from Miami, put into Federal Express packages, and sent out to all the ships. But at the time, the company was spending north of $200,000 a year on Federal Express to send out these vouchers. And then the spa manager would get the Federal Express in some port, go to the purser, sign for the cash, and then hand it out to the crew members. So as a public company, they had Sarbanes-Oxley issues, they had cash control issues, and they had extraordinarily expensive operations to pay people. So this was a seamless solution. And they said, okay, we'll make this as an opt-out. So out of the original 2,200 or so crew members, only about 40 opted out. And most of those were crew members that weren't returning. So we knew we had something. And this is many years ago. This probably goes back at least, 15, 18 years. And the crew members liked it. They didn't have to worry about cash. They did get paid. They could, take cash out of ATMs. They could send money home. That led to the cruise line industry, as I said earlier, adopting it globally. Overall, the feedback has been very, very good. A little bit different in the commercial space because I was in a sales call once and it said to the individual, what we're really selling is change, and people don't like change. And he looked at me and said, yeah, that's what you're doing here. The mechanism for the change is ShipMoney, the card program or the e-wallet solution. But what we're really trying to do is change behavior, both in terms of shoreside, how things are done, as well as crew members in terms of receiving their pay.
That is a theme on this podcast. If anybody has listened to this podcast, it is a theme, whether we're talking about things like payment or anything around digitalization in general, adopting to new platforms to use. That could be routing platforms. That could be platforms that will measure and look at decarbonization. It's all very much who moved my cheese. And this is a 100% change management exercise. When you got to that who moved my cheese moment with some of these guys, were you able to point to successes, not necessarily maybe in shipping, but just in general, that say, hey, this is being done in these other industries, and here's how we have looked at this experience before, to kind of help alleviate that nervousness, that anxiety?
A little bit. I mean, as you indicated earlier, you're a U.S. national, and we have a very established ACH direct deposit solution here in the United States. It exists in Britain. It exists in Europe, or maybe back then. I'm not sure when SEPA became live. But if you think about the demographics of the industry, it's a global industry, and there's no such thing as worldwide ACH. So if you have crew members from 10 or 20 or 40 different countries, hey. I remember years ago, I was sitting at a client, and the CFO said to me, she goes, we have 1,000 crew members, and sometimes the payments bounce back, sometimes they change their banks, whatever it is, and we have to administer the change in that beneficiary. I don't want my money to go into this account this month. I want it to go into that account. So she said to me, I'm not a bank. My obligation is to pay crew members. And the solution said is, you upload a file, you press a button, and everybody's paid. Let the crew member take the responsibility in terms of where, how, and when they send money home to their family members.
Right. And I think that hits into another interesting topic, and you kind of hinted upon this a little bit as well, is the whole idea, and this is, a parallel to things like emissions and collaboration and other stuff. And that's, things like data compliance and transparency. And certainly coming from the CPA background, compliance is a big part of what that role does. And talk a little bit about, how you have, I guess this is more of a shoreside issue, but like you said, is also a crew issue, to be transparent in this is how we do things. You pay the crew, how they distribute it is up to them, and they could see what's going on and where their money is going to end up.
Well, I'll go back to compliance. Every day you wake up and you open up the newspaper, or I guess people don't read newspapers, they open up the phone to see how the world has changed. And compliance is a ever evolving, extraordinarily complicated endeavor. I am on the phone every single day with my chief compliance officer. We were just having a conversation about one of our payment partners that is concerned about one of our clients that has market rumors out there. I note back to my counterpart at this payment partner was, are you making compliance decisions based on unsourced conjecture in the media, which is a dangerous precedent. But, one of the safe things about what we do is basically takes the responsibility away from the mainland agency or the cruise company or the third-party manager or the owner-operator, and passes that responsibility ultimately onto the crew member in terms of how, when, and where they send money home. Inevitably, our compliance holds requests for additional information on a daily basis, especially payments into certain parts of the world, Russia, Ukraine in particular. We have gone out of our way, working with our payment partners, to enable payments into those countries on behalf of the crew members, because at the end of the day, there's politics that exist at this level, and you have seafarers out there that are, working hard, and all their sole purpose basically is to work hard to send money home to the families. And fortunately, our payment partners understand that at a humanitarian level. But compliance in itself is extraordinarily difficult, and we just don't know what's going to happen tomorrow.
Yeah. And I think one of the other topics that goes along with compliance is, of course, cybersecurity. That's certainly been evolving in the maritime space. There are some ships running on really old platforms. Most of your, I guess you would call them, most of your kind of high-end ship owner operators have, however you could want to look at it, are typically, really, well-versed. But there is a lot of risk in terms of cybersecurity. How is that, paying attention to that if impacted what you do? Is what you do actually a little bit safer? And I know you don't want to necessarily make claims to that, but do you feel that it's safer? Or talk a little bit about just overall your cybersecurity stance as well. Because I think this is really interesting because, again, it gets into, okay, I got my money here, but you want to make sure that your platform is airtight.
We used to call it whack-a-mole. Whack-a-mole being an old game when you went to the carnival of people trying to game the system. We have penetration testing as part of our PCI compliance several times a year, where we engage outside firms basically to attack our system. It's a layered approach. Some of it is quite proprietary. During COVID, the cruise industry in particular, especially as the industry started to shut down, there were what appeared to be a series of coordinated attacks, and we actually had several conversations with our competitors during that time, and they were experiencing the same thing. The difference between us and our competitors is we are vertically integrated in that we are both payment processor and program provider. So all of the back-end authorization, settlements, reconciliations, security is all built into our system. So we have full visibility and control, and had a much easier time in terms of trying to address some of those breaches. But, knock on wood, we've been quite fortunate in terms of understanding where there are potential holes in our security protocol. Funds are locked down in segregated individual structured custodial accounts that require maker checker or dual controls in terms of moving the funds. During COVID, we pressed the button and basically forced everybody to change their passwords. We were the first company in the world to put OTP codes internal into our structure. So as I said, there's a number of layered approaches that we have, which are quite rigid in trying to protect ourselves as well as our client fund.
That's really important because, like you said, it is whack-a-mole. Anybody who's been involved in an organization of any heft, probably above 10 people, and I know there's actually rules about it here in the U.S. You're going through a constant evolution of learning when it comes to cybersecurity, phishing, now spear phishing, just even some of the basic stuff like that, where that has evolved. I do want to go back to a question that around change management. You talked about cruise ships seem to jump on it pretty quickly, and the bulk side was a little bit slower, or at least the cargo ship side. Why do you think that is? You did have the interesting conversation like we talked about where it's a change management issue, but why do you think there was that difference in the adaption? Was it a little bit of FOMO on the cruise side? So you had a bunch of folks who all did it, jumped in anyway. Was it the age profile of the cruise fleet, maybe a little bit younger and more used to this sort of thing? I'm really curious to explore that a little bit more.
I just had this conversation recently with somebody. And as I said, it's on a cruise ship, You have, a young fellow from Indonesia who's in the kitchen department, and he's chopping onions all day. And he's just a prep chef. It's relatively easy to find somebody to chop onions all day. And it's a cruise ships. They work extraordinarily hard. They work extraordinarily long hours, but on a relative basis, they make a good living. They can provide for their families. In the commercial space, it's a lot different in terms of trying to find a seafarer that has a certain skill set, has certain experience on a certain type of vessel that comes from a certain part of the world, and operates in a much smaller environment in terms of number of crew members. So I think that there's a lot more sensitivity in the commercial space relative to the crew members. They don't want to upset the apple cart. Your crew member is on a $2,500 a month contract. You can get $500 a month. Where do you want us to send you $3,000? Give us your bank account and we'll send it. I was in Greece a couple months ago and I was talking to a new client, and we said to them, listen, if you pay for that transaction home, what's the difference? And he goes, they said, absolutely. If I pay the crew member to send money home like we're doing now, but I give him that control, I give him that responsibility, there is no difference. And I joked with them. I said, listen, if things don't work out there, come work for us as salesmen. That basically is what we're trying to do. Enable the crew member to have more control over when, where, and how money is sent home. And the thing is that the industry payroll contract predominantly denominated in US dollar, but many crew members don't have US dollar accounts. So if your company sends a US dollars account to a foreign currency denominated account, the exchange happens on the receiving end, and it's okay. It doesn't happen on the front end where there's transparency. So this really gives crew members the ability basically to know what those exchange rates are and when they're going to be set, as well as offering them a wider range in terms of sending money out. It's not just wired to a bank account. It can be funds sent to wallets, funds sent for cash pickups to Western Union or MoneyGram or some of the other cash payout services. So that is the difference. And basically, if you're an owner operator or a third party manager, again, it's binary. Cash on board, wire sent home. Doesn't want the wire to go to the bank account. He wants to send cash to his grandmother. He doesn't have that option. With ShipMoney, he can do that from the ship. He can schedule it and take care of it rather than relying on somebody in the office.
Right. And then you have to rely on filling out some sort of form and making sure it's done correctly and everything else, rather than having that true control in your hands, so to speak, or on the platform. And again, I'm dating myself. When I used to sail, it was very different, but I do remember, like, okay, you set up your bank account. It was just, again, wired into the bank account. I don't even think I had an ATM card at that point, And I think, it's funny. You would go to the captain.
Is that what the podcast is called? Last Dinosaur?
Yeah, well, again, it was a long time ago. But one thing I can remember, I remember saying, like, as you signed off the ship's caps, like, hey, you want like $200 just to get yourself home in case you stop somewhere and want to get a beer or something. I was like, yeah, that's cool. And that came out of, obviously that was recorded. The next paycheck, again, I was working for a large oil company. There was no funny business. I never had to worry about an exchange rate or anything. But it sounds like you're working on solving an issue or a problem that a lot of seafarers face.
We have a client. We have a client. It's a Florida-based owner operator that trains its cargo throughout the Caribbean. And I don't remember where the demographics of this particular client, but what they used to do is they would Federal Express checks from the office here in South Florida to a bank in one of the islands. And the bank would take the check, cash it, wait for the ship to come in to give the cash to crew members. It's crazy. And that still exists out there. And that's the exception. It's not the norm. The world changes every day. The industry itself is somewhat slow to adopt the change. At the end of the day, what we are trying to affect is change in how the industry administers payroll for crew worldwide.
So I want to build on that. That's a great introduction there, because I want to build on that. Where are you seeing kind of the overall digital payment space? So not just your products are giving away your roadmap or what have you, but in the next 5 to 10 years, as you see this space evolve, taking into account regulations, sanctions, the changing geopolitical shift, the change potentially away from the dollar, which I think is going to be slower, but how are you seeing this evolve, just the payment process in the next 5 to 10 years as you're starting to think about all those things?
I won't go into the political question regarding the shift away from the dollar, because I don't know what that would look like, or if and when that would ever happen. We provide a very efficient way to pick them and giving them choice and option. Is cash ever going to go away in society? Probably not, but it is moving away from that. Is plastic ever going to go away from society? Probably not. But now, with Apple Pay and Samsung Pay and digital wallets, and real-time payments, there's an evolution in terms of the digitalization of currency. We are moving dramatically, rapidly in that direction, in terms of offering a wide set in front of how crew members receive their compensation and ultimately what they do with it. Not necessarily in currency and not necessarily on a piece of plastic. Yet, a digital currency.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be interesting to see that play out. Do you see any other implications in businesses that are more adjacent to the shipping industry, maritime industry? Like, what is the next step beyond kind of these sort of integrations and the way this is going?
I think that shipping is unique because of it's global. It operates 24 hours a day. It's obviously critical to the world in terms of the movement of goods. Everybody says 90% of the stuff that we have is somehow or another it's moved on a ship. Our focus is and will continue to be in the maritime space. I think many companies attempt to expand into other markets based on confidence in one and success in one particular market, and don't necessarily succeed in that. We think that there's a lot of runway in front of us in terms of not just payroll. And there are opportunities that come to us in other industries. Sometimes we pursue them. Sometimes they've been successful. But the maritime industry has, whatever the count is, 1.6 million crew members worldwide on 60,000 some vessels. And from a penetration standpoint, in terms of us and our competitors, still a relatively low percentage. So we see a lot of opportunity in the future, not just in payroll, but the broad range of payments aside from payroll as well.
Do you see this expanding into things like paying for things like stores and other types of payments that need to be made, sometimes with a signature by the captain or the chief engineer or first officer? Stores, bunkers, these sort of things. Bunkers, maybe that's a whole hot button topic that I think is different because a lot of it's done on credit. But let's say those sort of things that are from a global scale, not necessarily that expensive or that much of a needle mover. And I'm talking about getting your delivery of groceries. Now, putting aside a cruise ship, because that's different. But I'm talking about the cruise, weekly or every, 2 weeks, delivery of food or supplies, or having to, order extra rope from someplace. Do you see it moving in that way and kind of having that sort of payment there?
We do. Our use case is not just payroll, but we have clients use these for superintendents, for expense parts for the ships. In fact, one of our clients, and I won't name them, the large Norwegian outfit, saw this as an opportunity basically to remove cash from the ships. Methodically, over about a 6-9 month period, they reduced probably some 90% of the cash globally on all their ships. And then they went to their vendors and said, hey, listen, you're going to accept a card payment from us or you're not going to do business with us. And we're able to affect change across their supply chains to migrate away from from cash. It's a really, really good success story. So yes, as I said, there was more use cases than just payroll. Ship stores, micropayments. We have clients that use these, and we have integration with systems to enable crew members to purchase and settle within our system for these purchases. We have clients that use them for onboard expenses for traveling superintendents, et cetera, as well as offering payments outside of payroll for vendor payments, suppliers, et cetera, all encapsulated within that singular system.
Yeah, because I think that's where another point you pointed out a little bit earlier, which I thought was interesting. The number of seafarers and crew, and it's just even between yourselves and the various competitors or people who offer similar type of products, it's a low percentage of numbers. So there is a larger area for adaptation. How would you talk to them to say, hey, we need to change this here. This needs to move. What would be the one thing that you would say to these guys to say, don't be a dinosaur?
It's funny that you say that, because when I talk with my BD folks, I'm a lot better when the door is open. I'm not a good door opener. How do you do things today? Are there opportunities for improvement, both in terms of process and cost? And would you be open to us helping you evaluate those? So if we can make something more efficient, if we can provide a benefit to the crew member, if we can save you or them money, what's the downside? And that would be basically my opening pitch. For a long time when I first got started, I felt like Don Quixote chasing windmills for myself. But over time, that message has run true, and it's created competitors in the marketplace. And nobody knew who ShipMoney was, and nobody knew what we did. And over time, we have elevated our brand, elevated awareness in terms of what we do. And to some extent, competitors have helped that. We help them in terms of awareness in terms of these services, and they help us as well. So as long as we compete on a fair basis, we both benefit. So it's taken a long time. My kids always remind me that I repeat myself.
That's okay.
I think
so
that's
do
part of the
mine.
role.
So it's not unique.
Oh, okay. But recently at a client that I was talking with in Greece, we said to them, listen, if you're making a payment to a bank account and you're paying for that cost, and you pay a crew member into a wallet that has a debit card attached to it, you can use Western Union and card-to-card transfers and other bells and whistles, but also can make payments to a bank account. You pay for that. What's the difference? And he said, absolutely. I'm going to pay for that transaction. All I'm doing is passing the responsibility for that crew member to administer the payment to his bank account rather than me doing it. And essentially that is the sales pitch. If the costs are the same, you're still ahead. If there's savings, you're that much ahead. If there's administrative savings, that much ahead. So part of it is resistance to change. You have captains or folks that have been on ship and they move shoreside, and essentially there's fiefdoms and territorial battles, and how is this going to affect my job and my role and my responsibility? So we always face these sort of challenges when we bring out a client. But there's always one person that becomes our champion, that essentially says, "Hey, we like this. This is a good thing. We're going to initiate this. We're gonna adopt this, and we're gonna push this forward."
You always have to have the top-down support, but you need to have that middle of the pyramid change enabler, champion, whatever you want to call that person, who said, hey, this is going to save me time. We've had half the crew begging for this stuff. You don't know how many last-minute requests I get for changing which way the payment's going. As we wrap up, I love to ask this question, being a CEO on the go and a lot on the plate. What do you like to read these days? And is there anything recently that you've read? And it doesn't have to be about business. It could be about guilty pleasures.
Yes, actually, I am a voracious reader, and I read a broad spectrum. 5% of what I read is actually nonfiction. I'm not sure if that's my CPA background, but my wife and I recently were listening to the audiobook of 4 Agreements, which my daughter did years ago. My wife had read it. It's a hard read. It makes a lot more sense when you listen to it, and it's based on it's based on 4 premises. Your word is impeccable. It's the only thing that you have is what you say. Don't make assumptions about people. Don't take things personally, and do your best. And if you take these 4 basic premises in life, it's quite remarkable. And I have a conversation with one of my executives on a regular basis to say, no, I won't use his name. Edit that out. I want you to take a step back and evaluate this conversation you just had with somebody. You made an assumption, and that assumption might be wrong. So I'm trying to really live by those 4 premises. My word is my word. It's all I have, and it needs to be impeccable. When I say something, when I commit to something, it needs to be poetry. It needs to be the truth. And don't make assumptions. You don't know what somebody else is going through. You don't know what they're thinking. You don't know what they're posturing. And assumptions can really lead you down an incorrect path. Don't take things personally. How many of us receive something and we take it personal? And the last thing is you got to do your best. And sometimes your best isn't really your best, but in that moment, it is your best. And so that's my most recent read is the 4 agreements. And I'm putting that into practice every day.
That's pretty interesting. I took an online class recently about management and stuff here at work. And one of the topics was just that was about the assumption part. I think those are really good pillars to kind of focus on with business. Stuart, thank you for coming on the podcast. It was fascinating to learn about this very discrete problem that you're looking to solve, that you're looking to improve for not only the shore staff, but the seafarers as well. And I appreciate you coming on and talk about not only your personal journey, but the journey of the company and then the journey that you're seeing in the industry. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure, Chris, and appreciate the opportunity. Look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Absolutely.